It started at the corporate Christmas party, a glittering event where smiles were forced and glasses clinked louder than the conversations. My wife, Amanda, was the epitome of elegance in a crimson dress that turned heads as she floated between conversations. I played the dutiful husband, laughing at stale jokes from her coworkers and pretending not to notice her growing restlessness. And then, she disappeared. I had been watching her closely for weeks. Her sly smiles, the sudden late meetings, and the way she always seemed to be texting someone when she thought I wasn't looking. Tonight, my suspicions solidified as she slipped away with him. Travis, her colleague, the one she always referred to as just a friend. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where she was and what she was doing. Instead, I stayed at the table, sipping my scotch, a cold fire burning in my chest. When she returned 40 minutes later, her hair slightly mussed, her lipstick hurriedly reapplied, I barely looked up. Oh! Amanda's eyes lit up when she noticed the box on the table, wrapped in gold paper with a sleek black bow. Is this for me? I smiled faintly, swirling the ice in my glass. Of course it's for you. You've been working so hard lately. You deserve it. She grinned, a wicked glint in her eyes. You're such a sweetheart, Jack. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do without you. As she opened the box, her face transformed. Inside was a delicate diamond necklace, glittering under the soft glow of the chandelier. She lifted it with reverence, the sparkle reflecting in her wide eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered. And then, with a smirk that made my stomach churn, she added, You really do spoil me. I leaned forward, my smile razor-sharp. Only the best for you, Amanda. You're worth every penny. She didn't catch the edge in my voice. She was too busy admiring her reflection in the mirror-like surface of her wine glass. She didn't notice how my knuckles whitened as I gripped the edge of the table. She didn't realize that this gift wasn't a token of my love. It was the opening move in a game she didn't even know we were playing. As she gushed over the necklace, I silently promised myself that tonight would be the last time she felt like she had one. The night after the party, Amanda was unusually affectionate. She draped herself across the couch, twirling her new necklace with one hand while scrolling through her phone with the other. Every now and then, she'd glance up at me with a coy smile, as if she had some unspoken secret she wanted to share. But I knew the truth. I had known it for weeks. The realization came to me 3 months ago. Amanda had always been meticulous. Her calendar, her wardrobe, even the way she arranged our kitchen cabinets. But lately, there were cracks in her perfection. A pair of earrings left in her car, the faint scent of cologne that wasn't mine, and most damning of all, the hidden folder on her phone that she thought I wouldn't find. I remember sitting in my office late one night, staring at the folder labeled work stuff, with trembling hands. The photos inside were burned into my mind. Her and Travis in places I didn't even know she visited, laughing, touching, kissing. I wanted to confront her then and there. The rage was like a living thing inside me, clawing to escape. But I stopped myself. What good would yelling do? What would I accomplish by flipping a table or storming out the door? No, if Amanda wanted to play games, I would play too. But I would make the rules. And now, as she sat across from me, her polished nails tapping out a message to him, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had already begun weaving my web, and she was walking straight into it. Long day at work? I asked, keeping my voice light. She glanced up, startled, as though she had forgotten I was in the room. Oh yeah, you know how it is, meetings, deadlines. It never ends. I nodded, letting the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel uncomfortable. You've been working late a lot lately. Everything okay? Amanda's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. Of course. It's just a busy season. Lies. I stood and walked over to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She tensed under my touch, and for a moment, I thought she might pull away. Instead, she tilted her head back and smiled up at me, her eyes wide and innocent. You work so hard, I murmured. I just want to make sure you're not overdoing it. I'm fine, Jack, she said, her voice just a little too bright. You worry too much. I kissed her forehead, lingering for a moment longer than usual. I just love you, that's all. The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but they served their purpose. Amanda relaxed, her guard dropping just enough for me to see the cracks beneath her facade. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, I retrieved the small recorder I had hidden in her purse. It was a new addition to my arsenal, a device I had purchased on a whim but quickly realized would be invaluable. As I scrolled through the audio files, my heart pounded in my chest, and there it was, her voice, soft and breathy, saying his name. Travis, I can't wait to see you again. I set the recorder down, staring at the wall as the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me. But instead of breaking, I smiled. The game was officially in motion. The next morning, I brewed coffee as Amanda sauntered into the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune. She looked radiant, as if her world were perfect. But I knew better. Morning, she said, kissing my cheek. Thanks for the necklace again. I haven't stopped getting compliments on it. You deserve it, I replied, handing her a steaming mug. She took it with a satisfied smile, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. Today I would deliver the first blow. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but powerful enough to plant the seed of doubt in her mind. After she left for work, I reached for my phone and dialed a private investigator I'd hired 2 weeks ago. His name was Reed, a man with a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Did you get the photos I sent you? I asked. Crystal clear, he replied. What's next? Drop the first one at her office. No note, no explanation. Make sure it's on her desk before she arrives. Consider it done. I hung up and leaned against the counter, a strange mixture of satisfaction and dread coursing through me. The photo I'd chosen was simple. Amanda and Travis sitting too close at a coffee shop, his hand resting on her knee. Innocuous to a stranger, damning to anyone who knew. By the time Amanda returned home that evening, I could tell something was off. Her cheerful facade was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that she tried and failed to mask. How was work? I asked, keeping my tone casual as I poured us each a glass of wine. Fine, she said quickly. Too quickly. She avoided my gaze, her fingers fidgeting with the stem of the glass. Anything interesting happen? She hesitated, then shook her head. No, just the usual. Lies. As the night wore on, her unease grew. She barely touched her dinner, and when I asked if she was feeling okay, she mumbled something about being tired and excused herself to bed. I watched her retreating figure, my mind racing with possibilities. The first blow had landed. Now it was time to push further. The next day I escalated. While Amanda was at work, I sent her an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Do you think secrets stay buried forever?" Inside was another photo, this time of her and Travis in a hotel lobby. The timestamp was clear, the implication undeniable. When she came home that night, she was pale, her movements stiff and mechanical. You seem quiet, I said as we sat on the couch. Just tired, she muttered, staring blankly at the TV. Maybe you're overworking yourself, I suggested. Or, is something bothering you? Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with panic. For a split second, I thought she might confess. But then she laughed. A hollow, brittle sound. Don't be silly, she said, forcing a smile. Everything's fine. But everything was far from fine, and we both knew it. As the days passed, I watched her unravel. She jumped at the sound of her phone buzzing, avoided eye contact, and spent more time working late. Meanwhile, I kept feeding the fire. Another email here, a mysterious envelope there, each one a little more damning than the last. She didn't confront me, not yet, but I could see the weight of her secrets crushing her, inch by inch. The game had truly begun, and I was holding all the cards. Travis was the missing piece in my plan, the linchpin that held Amanda's secret life together. If I wanted to tear her world apart, I needed to bring him into the spotlight. Not forcefully, not yet. Subtlety was my weapon, and I would wield it like a scalpel. It started with a carefully orchestrated meeting. I knew Travis's schedule, thanks to Reed's meticulous surveillance. Every Tuesday at 7:15 a.m., he stopped by a trendy coffee shop downtown, One Amanda had recommended to me years ago. Funny how things come full circle. That morning, I arrived early, choosing a seat in the corner where I could watch without being noticed. When Travis entered, he looked exactly as I imagined. Tall, confident, with an easy charm that no doubt had swept Amanda off her feet. He ordered his coffee, scrolling through his phone as he waited. I approached him with a disarming smile. "Travis, right?" He looked up, startled. "Yeah, that's me. Do I know you?" "Not yet," I said, extending a hand. "Jack, Amanda's husband." His face went pale, a deer caught in the headlights. For a moment, he looked like he might drop his coffee. "Oh," he stammered, recovering poorly. Nice to meet you." I didn't give him time to process. "She's mentioned you before. Said you're one of her closest friends at work." Travis blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Yeah, we work together. She's great." I smiled, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him squirm. "You know, I've been wanting to meet you for a while now. Amanda speaks so highly of you. Mind if I join you for a bit?" He hesitated, but what could he say? Refuse the husband of the woman he was sleeping with? I sat down before he could answer. For the next 20 minutes, I peppered him with polite but pointed questions. How long had he and Amanda been friends? Did they spend a lot of time together outside of work? He tried to play it cool, but the cracks in his composure were glaringly obvious. When I finally stood to leave, I clapped him on the shoulder, leaning in just enough to make him uncomfortable. "It's great to finally meet you, Travis. You know, it's rare to find someone Amanda trusts so much. I hope we can get to know each other better." The unspoken threat hung in the air, and as I walked away, I could feel his eyes boring into my back. That evening, I sent him the first message. An anonymous email with a single sentence. "You can't hide forever." Attached was the same photo of him and Amanda in the coffee shop, the one I'd sent her days earlier. The response was immediate. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Amanda barely an hour later. I let it go to voicemail, smirking as I listened to her frantic message. "Jack, hey, can you call me back? Something weird happened today, and I need to talk to you." I didn't call her back. Let her stew in her paranoia. The next morning, I paid Travis another visit. This time, it was at his office. Reed had ensured that the security cameras wouldn't catch me entering or leaving, and I'd chosen my moment carefully, right before his lunch break, when his assistant had stepped away. "Jack?" he sputtered as I walked into his office, closing the door behind me. I didn't smile this time. "We need to talk." He froze, his eyes darting to the door like a cornered animal. "About what?" I tossed a photo onto his desk. Another one of him and Amanda, this time leaving a hotel. "About this." Travis stared at the photo, his face draining of color. "Look, I don't know what you think is going on. Don't insult my intelligence," I snapped, cutting him off. "I know exactly what's going on. The question is, how far are you willing to go to protect yourself?" He swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he pushed the photo away. "What do you want from me?" "Cooperation," I said simply. "You're going to help me unravel this mess. And in return, I'll make sure you don't lose everything." Travis stared at me, the weight of his situation sinking in. He knew he didn't have a choice. That night, Amanda came home looking more frazzled than ever. I watched her from the kitchen as she paced the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning concern. "Nothing," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff." "Lies." I leaned against the counter, sipping my wine as I studied her. "You know, Amanda, if there's ever anything you want to talk about, I'm here for you." She froze for a moment, her back to me. Then, without turning around, she muttered, "Thanks, Jack. That means a lot." She didn't see the smile that spread across my face, sharp and cold as a blade. The key to Amanda's past had been unlocked, and now, with Travis firmly in my grasp, I was ready to open the next door. The office was Amanda's sanctuary, the one place where she felt invincible. She thrived in her role as a project manager, adored by her colleagues and respected by her superiors. It was her domain, a kingdom she had carefully constructed over years of hard work and charm. But I was about to burn it to the ground. Started small. A misplaced email here, a delayed file there. I used Reed's access to Amanda's work accounts to subtly sabotage her projects. Nothing drastic, just enough to raise eyebrows and plant seeds of doubt. The perfect employee suddenly seemed distracted. The real damage began with a rumor. I crafted it carefully, feeding it to a junior employee I knew couldn't resist the allure of gossip. Did you hear Amanda's been having some issues at home? I heard it's affecting her work. Poor thing. Within a week, the whisper had spread through the office like wildfire. Amanda noticed, of course. She wasn't stupid. She caught the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered the room. "What's going on at work?" I asked one evening as we sat on the couch. She glanced at me, startled. "What do you mean? You seem tense, like something's bothering you." She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. "It's nothing, just office politics." "Are you sure?" I pressed, tilting my head in concern. "You know you can tell me anything, Amanda." Her smile was brittle, her eyes darting away. "I'm fine, Jack. Really. Lies." The next phase was more direct. Using the photos and recordings Reed had gathered, I created an anonymous account and began sending emails to her coworkers. Nothing overt, just enough to make them question her integrity. A photo of her and Travis in a compromising position, captioned, "Is this who you want managing your projects?" By the end of the week, Amanda's boss called her in for a meeting. She came home that evening pale and shaken, dropping her purse on the floor as she collapsed onto the couch. "Rough day?" I asked, masking my satisfaction with a tone of concern. "They're auditing my projects," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" "I don't know," she snapped, then immediately softened. "Sorry. I'm just stressed." I placed a hand on her knee, squeezing gently. "You'll get through this. You always do." She gave me a weak smile, but her eyes betrayed her fear. She was beginning to realize that her perfect world was crumbling, and she had no idea why. The next morning, I made my move with Travis. I called him early, my voice cold and sharp. "Did you do what I asked?" "Yes," he stammered. "I talked to her coworkers, dropped some hints about her behavior, but I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." She's starting to get suspicious. "You'll do as I say," I replied, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Unless you want your boss to see those hotel photos." Travis fell silent, his breathing heavy on the other end of the line. "Good," I said after a pause. "Now, here's what you're going to do next." The following week, Amanda's professional life imploded. An anonymous complaint about her conduct with Travis landed on her boss's desk, complete with evidence to support the claim. She denied everything, of course, but the damage was done. Trust had been shattered, and Amanda's once sterling reputation was in tatters. One night, as she sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, I approached her. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked gently. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with desperation. I don't know what's happening, Jack. It's like everything's falling apart, and I can't stop it." I crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe it's just a rough patch. Things will get better. You just have to stay strong." She nodded, her lip trembling. "I hope you're right." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. The web of lies I'd spun around her was tightening, and she was too entangled to escape. Amanda had always prided herself on her close-knit circle of friends. To the outside world, she was the glue that held the group together. The one everyone turned to for advice, a shoulder to cry on, or a night of laughter over wine and gossip. But what happens when the glue begins to lose its stickiness? When the cracks are small at first, barely visible, but grow wider until the entire structure collapses? I intended to find out. It began with her best friend, Lauren. They had been inseparable for years, the kind of friends who could finish each other's sentences and share a single glance that spoke volumes. But Lauren also had a weakness. She loved to be in control, to know things others didn't. I texted her from a burner number late one evening. You don't know who I am, but you need to know what Amanda's been up to. She's been lying to everyone, including you. Check your email. The email contained a carefully curated set of photos and screenshots. Nothing outright explicit, just enough to hint at Amanda's betrayal without revealing my hand. Lauren would fill in the blanks herself. That was the beauty of it. The fallout was almost immediate. The next day, Amanda's phone buzzed incessantly with texts and missed calls. At first, she ignored them, assuming they were work-related. But as the afternoon wore on, her frustration boiled over. "Why is Lauren being so weird?" she muttered, scrolling through her messages. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning disinterest as I stirred a pot of pasta on the stove. "She keeps texting me these cryptic things, like, 'We need to talk,' and 'I thought you were better than this.' Maybe you should call her," I suggested, hiding my smile. Amanda hesitated, then dialed. The conversation that followed was a train wreck in slow motion. "Lauren, what's going on?" Amanda began, her voice tense. There was a pause, and I could hear Lauren's voice on the other end, sharp and accusing. "Don't play dumb, Amanda. I saw the pictures. I know about Travis." Amanda's face went white, her hand clutching the edge of the counter for support. "What are you talking about? What pictures?" "Don't lie to me," Lauren snapped. "I've defended you to everyone, to my family, to the group, and this is how you repay me? By sneaking around behind Jack's back." "Lauren, I can explain." "I don't want your explanations. I want the truth. But I guess that's too much to ask from someone like you." The call ended abruptly, leaving Amanda standing in the kitchen, her phone still pressed to her ear. Over the next week, I watched as Amanda's friendships began to disintegrate. Lauren had clearly shared her suspicions with the rest of their circle, and the ripple effects were brutal. Invitations to brunches and gatherings stopped coming. Texts were left unanswered. The once vibrant group chat went silent. "What's wrong with everyone lately?" Amanda asked one evening, her frustration bubbling over. "It's like they're all avoiding me." "Maybe they're just busy," I offered, keeping my tone neutral. "You know how life gets." She nodded absently, but the doubt in her eyes was unmistakable. The final blow came at a mutual friend's birthday party. Amanda had insisted on attending, despite the tension simmering beneath the surface. "If I don't show up, it'll look suspicious," she'd reasoned. The evening started awkwardly but civil. Amanda worked the room with practiced charm, laughing and chatting as though nothing was amiss. But then Lauren arrived, and the air shifted. The two women exchanged icy pleasantries, their smiles thin and brittle. It wasn't long before the whispers began. I watched from a distance as Amanda's smile faltered, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Finally, someone, an acquaintance emboldened by too much wine, approached her directly. "So, Amanda," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "what's it like juggling two men at once?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Amanda. She stammered, her face flushing with humiliation. I don't know what you're talking about," she managed, but her voice lacked conviction. "Oh, come on," the woman pressed. "Everyone's heard the rumors. It's all anyone's been talking about." Amanda fled the party moments later, her carefully constructed social life in ruins. That night, she sat on the edge of our bed, staring blankly at the floor. "Jack," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think I'm a bad person?" I crouched in front of her, tilting her chin up so she had to look at me. "You're not a bad person, Amanda. But sometimes we make choices that hurt the people around us." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt a pang of guilt. Almost. "Things will get better," I promised, brushing a tear from her cheek. But I didn't mean it. Amanda began retreating into herself after the disastrous birthday party. The once vibrant and confident woman I had married was now a shadow of her former self, her steps tentative, her laughter hollow. It was time to exploit her growing insecurity, to blur the line between reality and paranoia until she questioned everything and trusted no one, not even herself. The mornings became a ritual of silence. She'd sit at the kitchen table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, her gaze distant. I would act the dutiful husband, placing a hand on her shoulder as I kissed her goodbye. "Try to have a good day," I'd say softly, my voice heavy with faux concern. But her days weren't good, and I ensured they wouldn't be. The first crack came in the form of small, inexplicable occurrences. She'd misplace her keys and find them later in the fridge. Her emails would be marked as sent when she swore she hadn't written them. One night, she woke me in a panic, claiming she heard footsteps in the hallway. "I didn't hear anything," I said groggily, turning over in bed. "They were there, Jack," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I know what I heard." I sighed, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. "Maybe it was the wind. You've been under a lot of stress lately, Amanda. It's probably just your mind playing tricks on you." She didn't argue, but I saw the doubt settle in her eyes. Then came the texts. They started innocently enough. A single message from an unknown number. "We need to talk." Amanda showed it to me, her brow furrowed. "Do you think this is about work?" I glanced at the screen, feigning confusion. "Maybe it's just spam. Ignore it." But ignoring it wasn't an option. Over the next few days, the messages became more frequent, more pointed. "I know what you've done. You can't hide forever. Does Jack know?" She blocked the number, but the messages kept coming from new ones. Each buzz of her phone made her flinch. She became jumpy, paranoid, constantly looking over her shoulder. "Who would do this?" she asked one night, pacing the living room. "I don't know," I said, my voice calm and measured. "But whoever it is, they're trying to get under your skin. Don't let them win." She nodded, clutching her phone tightly, but her hands shook. The final stroke of psychological warfare was the voice. Using a voice modulation app, I recorded a series of cryptic messages and set them to play through the smart speakers in our home at random intervals. The first time it happened, Amanda was in the shower. "Liar," the voice hissed, low and menacing, echoing through the bathroom. She screamed, bursting out of the shower with soap still in her hair. I rushed in, feigning alarm. "What's wrong? Did you hear that?" she panted, her eyes wide with terror. "Hear what?" She pointed at the speaker on the counter. It said something. A voice. I frowned, picking up the speaker and examining it. "Amanda, there's nothing wrong with this. Maybe you imagined it." She stared at me, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to catch her breath. "No," she whispered. "It was real." Over the next week, the voices became more frequent, always when she was alone in the house. Sometimes it was a whisper, a single word like cheater or guilty. Other times, it was a distorted laugh that sent her scrambling out of the room. She started sleeping with the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the house. I played my part perfectly, comforting her when she broke down but always planting seeds of doubt. "Maybe you should talk to someone," I suggested one evening as we lay in bed. "A therapist, just to help you process everything you're going through." "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" she snapped, her voice brittle. "Of course not," I said quickly. "But stress can do strange things to the mind, Amanda. It's not a weakness to ask for help." She didn't reply, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The breaking point came late one night. I woke to find Amanda standing at the foot of our bed, her eyes wild, her hair disheveled. "There's someone in the house," she whispered. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Amanda, we've been over this. There's no one here." "No," she insisted, her voice rising. "I heard them this time. They were in the kitchen." "I'm not imagining it, Jack." I got up reluctantly, grabbing a flashlight from the nightstand. "Fine, I'll check. Stay here." Of course, there was no one in the house. I made a show of searching every room, calling out her name as if to reassure her. When I returned, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. "There's nothing there," I said gently, sitting beside her. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Am I losing my mind?" I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You're just tired," I murmured. "Everything's going to be okay." But it wasn't. Not for her. Amanda's breaking point wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, eerily so. I knew it was coming, but even I didn't expect the exact moment it would happen. It was as though she had walked out of herself and left the empty shell behind. She had started avoiding mirrors, a habit I noticed after another late-night incident with the voices. Every morning, she would brush her teeth in front of the bathroom sink, her eyes fixed firmly on the countertop. She'd run a hand through her hair, never looking up, never meeting her own gaze. "Why don't you look at yourself anymore?" I asked one morning, my voice casual as I adjusted my tie in the mirror. Her hand froze mid-motion. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't like what I see." "Maybe you're just tired," I offered, pretending not to notice the way her fingers trembled. She nodded absent-mindedly, but I could tell the thought had burrowed deep into her mind. I began leaving subtle reminders of her unraveling around the house. The first was a note on the bathroom mirror. Written in lipstick, it read, "Do you even know who you are anymore?" She found it after I'd left for work. When I came home that evening, the mirror was spotless, but Amanda was quieter than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked, sitting beside her on the couch. She nodded, her gaze distant. "Just work stuff," she muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. The next day, I did it again. This time, the note read, "Liar." This one pushed her over the edge. I came home to find her pacing the living room, her hands gripping her phone like a lifeline. "Jack," she said the moment I walked in, her voice frantic. "Someone's been in the house. They left another message on the mirror." "What message?" I asked, feigning alarm. She pulled me into the bathroom, pointing at the perfectly clean mirror. I wiped it off, but it was there. "I swear, it was there." "Did you call the police?" She hesitated, her face flushing. "No. They wouldn't believe me. They'd think I was crazy." "You're not crazy," I said firmly, placing my hands on her shoulders. "But Amanda, are you sure it was real? With everything going on, maybe it's just—" "I know what I saw," she snapped, stepping back. Her voice cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm not imagining this, Jack. I'm not." I pulled her into an embrace, stroking her hair as she sobbed against my chest. "It's okay," I murmured. "We'll figure this out. Together." Over the next week, I escalated my efforts. The voices through the smart speakers became louder, more menacing. I programmed them to play when I was out of the house, ensuring she'd have no one to corroborate her experiences. One evening, she called me in tears. "Jack, I need you to come home. Please. I can't be here alone anymore." "I'm in the middle of a meeting," I lied, keeping my tone calm. "What's wrong?" "They're back," she whimpered. "The voices, they're everywhere. I don't know what to do." "Just breathe, Amanda," I said soothingly. "I'll be home soon." By the time I returned, she was curled up on the couch, clutching a blanket like a lifeline. "They're trying to make me think I'm crazy," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "But I'm not. I'm not." "I know you're not," I replied, sitting beside her and wrapping an arm around her. "But maybe it's time to get help. Professional. Someone who can help you make sense of all this." She didn't respond, but the way her shoulders slumped told me I'd planted the seed I needed. The final act of this chapter came in the form of a mirror, a large, antique one I placed in our bedroom under the guise of a surprise gift. "It's beautiful," Amanda said when she saw it, her voice flat. "I thought it might help," I said, feigning a sheepish smile. "You've seemed off lately, and I thought maybe you just needed a reminder of how beautiful you are." She stared at the mirror for a long time, her reflection staring back at her. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, a spark of the old Amanda. But then she blinked, and it was gone. That night, as she slept, I placed another message on the mirror, using a removable marker this time. "You can't hide from yourself forever." When she woke the next morning, the scream that echoed through the house was one of pure, primal terror. I rushed into the bedroom, feigning panic. "Amanda, what's wrong?" She pointed at the mirror, her hand trembling. "It's happening again," she whispered. "Jack." What's happening to me? I pulled her into my arms, hiding my smile in her hair. It's okay, I murmured. We'll get through this. Together. But we wouldn't. Not really. Amanda's descent into her own personal hell was no longer subtle. The cracks had widened into chasms, and she was stumbling blindly into them, desperate for answers to questions she couldn't articulate. My job now was to guide her, slowly, carefully, toward the edge of the abyss, ensuring she'd never find her way back. She began spending her days researching things I knew she would never fully understand. I'd come home to find her laptop open, tabs upon tabs of articles on auditory hallucinations, paranoia, and stress-induced delusions. She had notebooks filled with scribbled notes, lists of every strange thing that had happened, and possible explanations. They all say it's in my head, she muttered one evening, flipping through a psychology textbook she'd borrowed from the library. But it's not, Jack. I know it's not. I sat across from her, feigning concern as I sipped my coffee. Maybe it's not about what's in your head, I said carefully. Maybe someone's messing with you. Have you considered that? Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. You think someone's doing this to me? But who? Why? I don't know, I said with a shrug. But if it's not in your head, then someone must have a reason. Maybe you upset someone without realizing it. She stared at me, her mind racing. I could practically see the gears turning, each thought more frantic than the last. The next day, she confided in me that she wanted to install security cameras around the house. Just to prove I'm not crazy, she explained, wringing her hands nervously. I agreed without hesitation, even offering to help her set them up. Of course, I made sure to install a second system that I could control remotely. Every flicker of movement, every shadow cast across the walls, it would all feed her paranoia while keeping me in complete control. The first night with the cameras was quiet. Too quiet. Amanda sat in the living room, her eyes glued to the live feed on her laptop. She barely spoke, barely moved, her entire body tense with anticipation. Around midnight, I triggered the motion sensor in the kitchen. A faint shadow moved across the screen, just enough to catch her attention but not enough to be identifiable. What was that? She whispered, her voice shaking. What was what? I asked, pretending to glance up from my book. The shadow. In the kitchen. I didn't see anything. I lied, standing up to investigate. Stay here. I'll check. Of course, I found nothing. But Amanda didn't sleep that night. As the days passed, the shadows became more frequent. Sometimes they appeared on the stairs, sometimes in the hallway outside our bedroom. Amanda grew more agitated with each passing night, her exhaustion etched into the dark circles beneath her eyes. I'm not crazy, she repeated to herself one morning, clutching a mug of coffee with trembling hands. I'm not crazy. You're not, I assured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. But you can't keep running yourself into the ground like this. Maybe it's time to get some professional help. She shook her head violently. No, they'll just tell me I'm imagining things. They'll drug me up and make me forget everything. I sighed, as if reluctant to say what I was about to say. Then maybe you need to take matters into your own hands. If no one else believes you, prove them wrong. How? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dig deeper, I said. Find out who's behind this. Fight back. Her eyes lit up with a flicker of determination, and I knew I had her exactly where I wanted her. Amanda began spending her days combing through old emails, text messages, and social media posts, searching for any clue that might point to an enemy she didn't know she had. She created a wall in the guest room, pinning up photos, printouts, and handwritten notes connected by lines of red string. This doesn't make sense, she muttered one night, staring at the chaotic collage. None of this makes sense. Maybe you're overthinking it, I suggested, careful not to sound dismissive. No, she snapped, turning to face me. There's a pattern here. I just haven't found it yet. I nodded, pretending to consider her words. What if it's closer than you think? Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I don't know, I said with a shrug. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we least expect. Her face paled, and I could see the doubt flicker across her expression. For the first time, she hesitated before responding. That night, I ramped up the psychological pressure. I triggered a message to play through the speakers in the guest room as she worked. "You'll never escape," it whispered, the words distorted and haunting. Amanda froze, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly, she turned toward the speaker, her hands clenched into fists. "Who are you?" she screamed, her voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" There was no response, only the low hum of the speaker as it returned to silence. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I waited a few minutes before entering the room, feigning confusion. "Amanda? What happened?" "They're here," she choked out between sobs. "They're in the house, Jack. I can't take this anymore." I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms. "It's okay," I murmured, stroking her hair. "We'll figure this out. Together." But I wasn't helping her. I was leading her deeper into the darkness, ensuring she'd never find her way out. Amanda's paranoia had reached its peak. She no longer trusted her own thoughts, and the walls of her carefully constructed world were crumbling. She had stopped going to work, stopped responding to friends, and even stopped pretending to be okay when I was around. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had manipulated and broken, was no longer there. In her place was a shell of fear and confusion, someone who couldn't distinguish the real from the imagined. I had pushed her so far, planted so many seeds of doubt, that she was now a walking, breathing confession of my success. But there was still one final step. One final moment when Amanda would break completely, when she would have no choice but to confront the truth, her truth. And it would be my truth too. It all began on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I came home to find her standing in the hallway, staring at the front door as though she were waiting for someone. Her face was pale, her eyes wild with fear. "Amanda?" I called softly as I set down my briefcase. "What's going on?" She didn't respond, not right away. Her eyes flicked toward me for a split second before darting back to the door. She looked like she was about to speak, but her lips trembled, and the words stuck in her throat. I crossed the room slowly, pretending not to notice how her body trembled as I neared. "Amanda, talk to me. What's going on?" "It's him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's here. He's been watching me." My stomach twisted, and for a brief moment, I almost felt a pang of guilt. Almost. I had led her here, into a spiral of madness where every shadow was a threat, every creak of the floorboards a message. I had become her nightmare. "Who, Amanda?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Who's here? Who's been watching you?" She backed away slowly, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. I don't know. I don't know who it is, but they've been in the house. Watching. Waiting." I shook my head, my tone calm and reassuring. "There's no one here, Amanda. No one is watching you. You've been through a lot lately. Maybe you should take a walk, get some air." But she didn't listen. She was beyond listening now. "No, Jack," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this." I stepped closer, my hand reaching for hers. "What are you talking about?" You're the one," she gasped, her eyes wide with a realization that hit her like a bolt of lightning. "It's been you. You've been behind everything." Her words struck me like a hammer. For the first time, I felt the weight of the monster I had become. She had figured it out. She had finally connected the dots. The perfect plan I had carefully constructed was beginning to fall apart. I froze, my mind scrambling to maintain control. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice too calm, too collected. "Everything?" she choked, tears running down her cheeks. "The cameras, the voices, the notes. You've been doing this to me. You've been making me crazy." I stepped back, swallowing the bitter taste of fear and guilt. "Amanda," I said softly, "you're not well. This isn't you talking. You need help. I'm just trying to protect you, keep you safe." Her eyes hardened, and for a brief moment, I saw the fire that had once burned inside her, the woman who had loved me without question. But that woman was fading, replaced by the broken, paranoid woman I had created. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can see it now. I can see what you've done. You've been tearing me apart, making me think I'm losing my mind. But I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, Jack." I could feel the control slipping from my hands. The dam I had carefully built around her mind was starting to crack, and I wasn't ready for it to break. Not yet. I reached for her, but she pulled away, her face twisted in disgust. "No," she repeated, her voice stronger now. "I'm done. I'm done with you." I felt a chill spread through me, and for the first time in weeks, I was terrified. Not because she was leaving me, no, I had prepared for that. I had anticipated every move, every word she might say, but because I had underestimated her. She didn't leave immediately. That night we slept in the same bed, but the space between us had grown too wide, too impossible to bridge. She turned her back to me, her body rigid and stiff, and though I pretended to sleep, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The next morning she was gone. I had expected it. I had known it was coming, even if I didn't want to admit it. I found her note on the kitchen counter, folded neatly, the handwriting almost elegant in its finality. "Jack, I know what you've done. You can't control me anymore. Goodbye, Amanda." I stared at the note for a long time, the words blurring through a haze of disbelief. She had finally seen through my lies, exposed the truth I had buried so deep within myself. I had lost. The weeks that followed were a blur of half-hearted attempts to reach her. Calls that went unanswered, texts that remained unread. I watched her slowly distance herself from me, her presence slipping further and further away with each passing day. And I couldn't stop her. I couldn't fix it. I had broken her, but in the end, she had broken free. Amanda was gone, but the shadows she left behind haunted every corner of the house. The silence felt like a suffocating weight pressing against my chest, and no matter how much I tried to fill the empty space with distractions, work, alcohol, TV, it wouldn't go away. It was the kind of emptiness that gnawed at you from the inside out. I had spent so much time building her up, shaping her mind into something I could control, that I had never considered what would happen once she saw through it all. Now I was left with nothing but the wreckage of my own doing. The house felt cold without her. Her absence seeped into everything. I found myself looking at the spots where she used to be. Her books on the coffee table, her shoes by the door, the little things that had once made the house feel like home. I hated it. For the first time, I realized how much I had relied on her love, her dependence, her fear, and now it was all gone. It started with the phone calls. At first, I thought I had imagined it. A ring in the middle of the night, followed by the click of a disconnected line. But then it happened again, and again. Always at odd hours, always when I least expected it. I stared at the phone in my hand, unsure of whether to pick up or not. I knew it was her, or at least I hoped it was. Some part of me believed that maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe she was coming back, realizing that the world I had created for her was the only place where she could truly belong. I answered the phone on the 10th ring. "Hello." There was only silence on the other end. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed the phone to my ear. "Amanda?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Nothing. I sat there for a long moment, the emptiness in my chest expanding with every second of silence. Was she playing games with me? Had she decided to torment me like I had tormented her? I hung up and dialed her number again. No answer. It happened every night for a week. Silence. No explanation. Just the cold ringing of the phone and the hope that maybe, just maybe, she would finally speak. Then came the emails. At first, it was a single message. Short, cryptic, and full of words that seemed nonsensical, like someone trying to communicate through a haze. It read, "I see you. I know what you did. I'm not afraid anymore. You're not in control." I stared at the message, feeling my stomach drop. The way it was worded, the way it felt so familiar. It was Amanda. She was trying to reach me, but in a way that felt cold, distant, almost like she was mocking me. I hit reply, fingers shaking as I typed. Amanda, please. I'm sorry. I'll make it right. Just come home. We'll fix this. But she never responded. The messages came more frequently, each one more pointed, more direct. You think you can control everything, Jack. But you can't. You've lost. You can't hide from the truth forever. And then one day the last message appeared. It's over. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my mind. It's over. That was it. The final blow. Amanda was gone, and she wasn't coming back. I tried to move on, tried to pretend like it didn't hurt. I threw myself back into work, buried myself in my old routines, but nothing felt right anymore. The things that had once brought me satisfaction felt meaningless. It was as though the world had lost its color, its shape. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had created my own downfall. I had made Amanda afraid of everything. Of me, of herself, of the world. I had broken her, manipulated her, until she was nothing more than a puppet on strings. And when the strings snapped, when she finally saw through me, I was left with nothing but the pieces. I started seeing things, shadows in the corner of my eye, movements that weren't there, voices in the background that I couldn't quite make out. At first, I thought it was just the stress getting to me, but after a while, I couldn't ignore it. It was like Amanda was still there, somehow watching, waiting. I began hearing her voice in the silence of the house, soft whispers that I couldn't understand, but felt in my bones. Her presence lingered, an echo of something I had destroyed. One evening, I decided to go to the place where it all started, the coffee shop where I had first met Amanda. I needed to see it, to feel it, as if somehow revisiting the beginning would bring me some kind of closure. The moment I walked in, the familiar scent of coffee and pastries hit me. I scanned the room, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw her. Amanda sitting by the window, looking just as she had when we first met. Her smile, her laughter, the way she had looked at me like I was the only person in the world. But when I approached, the seat was empty. No one was there. I sat down, the silence settling in around me. I couldn't escape it. It was everywhere. The memory of Amanda. The haunting reminder of the woman I had broken. As the weeks passed, I began to see it for what it was, the consequences of my own actions. The control I had so carefully built had crumbled, and I was left with nothing but the shattered pieces of a life I had destroyed. But the real question lingered, burning at the back of my mind. Had I really broken her? Or had she broken me? It was strange how quickly the void consumed everything I had once taken for granted. Every time I walked through the door, the silence slapped me in the face. Every time I touched the walls, the coldness seemed to seep deeper into my bones. I thought that by controlling her, by breaking Amanda down piece by piece, I could somehow fill the emptiness inside me. But now, standing alone in the remnants of my own making, I realized I had been chasing something I would never catch: peace. I tried to convince myself that I was fine, that life was moving forward, that I could put all of this behind me and start fresh. But it wasn't that easy. There were too many loose threads, too many moments that lingered in the corners of my mind. The first time I saw her again, I almost didn't recognize her. I had just finished an exhausting day at the office, and as usual, I decided to stop by the small bookstore nearby to clear my head. I had taken to wandering the aisles, hoping the quietness of the shelves could soothe the panic that gripped my chest every time I was alone. And then I saw her. Amanda stood by the poetry section, flipping through a worn book, her fingers tracing the pages absent-mindedly. Her hair was shorter now, darker, and she looked different, stronger, more composed. She wasn't the fragile woman I had twisted into a puppet. She was someone new, someone who had rebuilt herself in ways I couldn't understand. For a moment I froze. It wasn't until she looked up, catching my gaze, that I saw the shift in her expression. There was no recognition, no warmth, just a calm, measured indifference. The woman who once loved me, who once feared me, had become someone entirely foreign. She stood there for a long moment, her eyes scanning my face, but she didn't say anything, didn't make a move. It was like she was assessing me, like she could see the weight of my guilt pressing down on me. I opened my mouth, ready to say something, anything, But the words didn't come. What could I possibly say? How could I explain the damage I had caused? The lies, the manipulation, the control? There was no apology that could ever be enough. And then she spoke. "Jack." Her voice was steady, without emotion. "You look different." I nodded, unable to form a response. I felt like a fool standing there, as though every word I had ever spoken to her was a lie. "I've moved on," she said simply. "I hope you can too." I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand, stopping me. "Don't," she said softly. "It's over. I'm done." That night, I sat in the empty house, staring at the ceiling. The realization hit me harder than any punch I had ever received. I had lost her for good. I didn't have the power to control her anymore. I didn't have anything anymore. All the manipulation, the carefully crafted games, had only resulted in one thing: complete and utter failure. I thought back to the beginning, to when I had convinced myself that I was doing what was necessary, that Amanda would never see the truth, never escape the cage I had built. But now the cage was mine, and the key had long been lost. The days dragged on. I tried to piece together the life I had destroyed, tried to move forward, but nothing felt real anymore. Every day was an exercise in pretending. Pretending I was okay. Pretending I wasn't haunted by the memory of her. I knew now that the redemption I sought wasn't going to come easily. I couldn't undo what I had done to Amanda, and I couldn't fix myself either. All I could do was live with the consequences. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take the weight of it all, I received a letter. It came on a Thursday afternoon, one of those rare moments when the house wasn't engulfed in silence. The letter was simple, just her name on the front, written in neat, careful handwriting. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. "Jack, I've been thinking about what you said, what you did. I won't pretend that it didn't hurt, but I need you to know that I'm not angry anymore. What you did, it broke me, yes, but it also made me stronger. I found a way to stand on my own, to be the person I am now because of everything you did. I've forgiven you, Jack, but that doesn't mean I'll ever be coming back. I'm moving forward. You need to do the same. Goodbye, Amanda." I read the letter over and over, my eyes blurring with the sting of tears. Forgiveness. She had forgiven me, but I knew, deep down, that forgiveness didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the damage I had done, the life I had torn apart. Amanda had rebuilt herself, had found the strength to move on, and now I had to find a way to do the same. But how could I? How could I move forward when every step felt like a reminder of what I had destroyed? The truth was, I would never have redemption. I would never fix the mess I had made. But I had to live with it. I had no one to blame but myself. And maybe, in the end, that was the most painful truth of all. The days blurred together after I read Amanda's letter. It sat on my desk, its words etched into my mind, replaying over and over. She had forgiven me. Something I never expected, something I couldn't have hoped for, but it didn't bring the relief I had imagined. Instead, it felt like a final judgment. Her forgiveness wasn't a salvation. It was an acceptance of the reality that she was no longer part of my life. I had spent months controlling her, manipulating her into a shell of who she once was. I had made her believe she was insane, convinced her that the truth was something she could never fully grasp. And in doing so, I had lost everything. Her love, her trust, her very essence. She was free now, and I was the one left caged in the aftermath of my actions. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just the empty house, or the silence, or the shadows in the corners of my vision. It was something more. Every time I walked into a room, I felt eyes on me, as if Amanda was still here, still seeing through me. The weight of her absence became a presence in itself. I began to question whether I had truly let her go, or if I was still tangled in the web I had spun around us. Weeks passed. I tried to fill the void with work, with distractions, but nothing worked. The world outside had moved on, but I was trapped, suspended in a moment that never ended. One night, after a particularly long day at the office, I found myself walking to the same coffee shop where Amanda and I had first met. It was almost like a compulsion, an attempt to grasp at some piece of the past I could never have again. I told myself it was just a walk, just a need to clear my mind, but I knew better. I was chasing ghosts. As I entered the shop, the warm smell of roasted beans and baked pastries hit me. It was familiar, comforting, but it only deepened the ache in my chest. I ordered a coffee, not really caring about the taste, and sat by the window, staring out into the night. The city buzzed with life, people coming and going, laughing, talking, living. And then I saw her. She stood across the street, her silhouette outlined against the streetlights. My heart lurched in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined her. But no, it was her. Amanda. She hadn't seen me yet, but I knew it was her. Her posture was different now, confident, composed. She wasn't the broken woman I had left behind. She was someone new, someone who had reclaimed herself. She walked past the coffee shop, her head held high, her steps sure and purposeful. I stood up, unable to stop myself, and moved toward the door. But before I could reach it, she disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, frozen, watching the empty space where she had been. The weight of my regret settled over me like a thick fog. She had truly moved on. She had found peace, had built a life without me. And I was still stuck in the ruins of what we had once been. For the first time in months, I felt the desperate need to change. Not to get her back, because I knew that was impossible, but to fix myself. To rid myself of the toxic need for control that had driven me to break someone I had once loved. I knew I couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, I could learn something from it. I took a step outside the coffee shop and walked down the street, trying to shake off the heavy thoughts that weighed me down. I passed a park, the swings gently swaying in the wind, and I remembered the old days, when life had seemed simple and full of promise. Before I had learned the dangerous art of control, before I had made someone else's life a game. But the truth remained. I had destroyed my chance for happiness. Amanda had given me everything, her trust, her love, and I had turned it into something twisted. And no matter how many steps I took, no matter how far I went, I couldn't outrun the consequences of my actions. I spent the next several days reflecting. I tried to focus on myself, on doing better, but it was hard. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the same person staring back at me, the man who had hurt the woman who had once meant everything to him. I contacted a therapist, began the long process of confronting the anger, the insecurity, the need for control that had driven me to hurt Amanda. It was a difficult journey, and there were moments when I wanted to give up, moments when I felt like the weight of my guilt would crush me. But each time I faltered, I thought of Amanda, her strength, her ability to rebuild, and I knew I couldn't quit. She had forgiven me, yes, but forgiveness didn't mean absolution. It didn't mean she was coming back. It simply meant she had chosen to let go of the past and move forward. It was time I did the same. Weeks turned into months. I kept going to therapy, kept working on myself, but there were still moments when I thought of Amanda, when I wondered if she ever thought of me. I knew she had moved on. I had to move on, too. But there was one thing that lingered. One thing I couldn't stop asking myself. What if I could have been better? But then I remembered something she had said in her letter. The last words she'd written to me. I'm moving forward. You need to do the same. She had found her way. It was time I found mine. Months passed, but the past never seemed to truly fade. The house, once filled with the echoes of laughter and arguments, stood in eerie silence. I had tried to fill it with the sounds of new routines, new habits, work, therapy, the occasional attempt at socializing. But there was a hole in the center of everything, one that no amount of distraction could fill. Some days it was almost as if Amanda had never existed. Her absence felt like a bad dream, a memory I had tried to forget but couldn't. The weight of what I had lost sat heavy on my chest, and the guilt of my past actions hung around me like a cloud that refused to dissipate. It wasn't until one evening that I felt the bitter sting of reality, the realization that there was no going back, that everything I had done had led me here, to this broken version of myself. I was sitting at my kitchen table, absently scrolling through emails when I noticed a familiar name in my inbox. The subject line simply read, I need to tell you something. It was from Amanda. My heart skipped a beat, And for the first time in a long while, I felt something other than numbness. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, unsure of what I would find inside. Jack, there's something I need to say. I've thought about this for a while, but I didn't know how to put it into words. I know you've been trying to move on, and I've been doing the same. But I need to be honest with you, even though it might hurt. I found someone else. Someone who makes me feel safe. Someone who loves me the way I deserve. It's hard for me to say this, but I think it's time to close this chapter of my life for good. I'm no longer the person I was when we were together, and I've realized that I don't need to be trapped by the mistakes of the past. I hope one day you'll understand. This isn't about forgiveness anymore. It's about moving forward, for both of us. I wish you the best. Goodbye, Amanda. The words hit me harder than I could have imagined. It was the final blow, the confirmation that Amanda had truly moved on, that she was no longer the woman I had known. I had imagined this moment for months, fantasized about what it would feel like when she finally let go. But now that it had come, I felt nothing but a hollow ache. She had found someone else, someone who made her feel safe. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. The bitter truth of it all hit me harder than any emotional manipulation ever could. It wasn't just that she had moved on. It was that she had found someone who was everything I had promised to be, but had failed to deliver. It was too late now. My time had passed. All the chances I had wasted, all the times I had chosen control over love, all the moments I had turned away from her. I couldn't undo them. I had destroyed what we had, and no amount of therapy, no amount of personal growth could fix that. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I thought about the life she was building with someone else, the future she was creating. A future without me. I tried to distract myself, tried to go through the motions of daily life. But every corner of my existence felt empty. No matter what I did, I couldn't escape the thought that Amanda was gone, and she wasn't coming back. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself back in the place where it had all begun. The coffee shop. The place where I had met Amanda, where everything seemed so full of potential, so full of promise. I sat at the same table we had once shared, a cup of coffee in front of me that had long gone cold. The world outside was bustling with life. People walked by, laughing, talking, living. They had no idea of the destruction that had unfolded in this small corner of the city. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be reminded of how far I had fallen. But the truth kept coming back, over and over again. I had lost her, and I had no one to blame but myself. I left the coffee shop and walked down the street, the cold night air biting at my skin. I thought about the man Amanda had found, the man who could offer her everything I hadn't. And for the first time, I realized that it wasn't just my relationship with Amanda that had ended. It was my own identity, my own understanding of who I was. I had let my need for control define me for so long, and now, in the wake of it all, I didn't know who I was anymore. Days turned into weeks, and the sense of loss only deepened. I threw myself into work, tried to rebuild some semblance of a normal life, but it was all a facade. The hole inside me had grown too large to ignore. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fill it. It wasn't until one quiet evening that I received a message. It was from Amanda, but this time it was different. There was no forgiveness, no attempt to ease the pain. Jack, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know things ended badly between us, but I want you to know that I'm at peace now. I'm no longer angry or sad. I've learned to forgive myself for letting you control me, for letting you define me. I hope one day you can do the same. Take care of yourself. I'm finally okay. I hope you can be too. Her words stung, but not in the way I expected. There was no anger, no bitterness, just an understanding that we were both moving on, in different ways. It was the closure I had been too afraid to seek, the peace I had been desperate to find. But now that it was here, it felt like a betrayal to everything we had once had. I sat back, staring at the screen, and finally realized something I had been avoiding all along. I could never fix what I had broken. The pieces of us that had shattered could never be put back together. Amanda had forgiven me, but that didn't change the fact that I had lost her. The world had moved on. That was the only thought that seemed to echo in my mind now. Amanda had moved on, the people in my life had moved on, and I was still stuck in the same endless loop of regret, replaying the past in my head over and over, unable to escape the consequences of my own actions. It was strange how time had a way of changing things, how the sharp edges of pain dull into something almost manageable, only for them to resurface when you least expect it. I had convinced myself that I had moved forward too. Therapy, a new routine, and endless attempts at self-improvement had all been part of the plan. But now, after everything, I knew that no amount of work could ever erase the guilt that gnawed at me every single day. It was one of those cold, gray mornings in late autumn when I finally decided that I couldn't keep running anymore. I had spent months trying to forget, trying to convince myself that I could leave everything behind, but the truth had settled deep within me. I would never truly escape the mess I had made, and so I made a choice. I called her, Amanda. I remember how my hand shook as I dialed her number. I had tried to reach out before, but each time I had chickened out, telling myself I wasn't ready, that I had no right to intrude into her life. But this time I couldn't hide from the truth. I needed to know where we stood. I needed closure, not for me, but for both of us. The phone rang, and I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Hello. Her voice was calm, steady, nothing like the woman I had once known. She sounded at peace, and that, in itself, was a knife to my chest. Amanda, I breathed, almost unsure of how to start. I need to talk to you. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her thinking, weighing the decision of whether or not to engage with me. Okay, she finally said, her tone carefully neutral. What do you need? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. This was the moment that I had feared. There were no more games, no more manipulation. It was just me and the truth. I need to apologize, I said, the words stumbling out. I need you to know that I understand now. Everything I did to you, everything I put you through, I see it. I see how much I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. I'm sorry, Amanda. I'm so sorry. I waited for her to say something, anything, but there was silence on the other end. I don't need your apology, she said quietly after what felt like an eternity. You hurt me, Jack. You made me feel like I was nothing. And I'm sorry, but I can't just forget that. You had your chance. I swallowed hard, the sting of her words piercing me like a blade. I deserved this. I deserved every bit of it. I don't expect you to forgive me, I whispered. I needed you to know how sorry I am. And I wanted to know if you're really okay. If you've moved on. There was a long pause. For a moment I thought she might hang up, that she might tell me she didn't want anything more to do with me. But instead, she sighed softly. I've moved on, she said, the certainty in her voice like a slap to my face. I found peace, Jack. It wasn't easy, but I'm finally in a place where I'm happy. I'm with someone who respects me, who values me for who I am. And that's more than I could have ever gotten from you. Her words cut through me like nothing before. The truth of them was undeniable. I had lost her. She was gone from me, not just physically, but emotionally, completely. And there was no going back. I don't want anything from you anymore, she continued. I don't need your apology to feel better, and I don't need you to be part of my life. I've moved on, and so should you. Her words weren't harsh, but they were final. I could hear the peace in her voice, the strength that had come from the pain I had caused. It was the sound of someone who had risen from the ashes, someone who had found her own way, free of me. I understand, I said, though I didn't really. How could I ever understand the depths of the pain I had caused her, the strength it took for her to reclaim herself? Goodbye, Jack, Amanda said softly before hanging up, and that was it. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, but all I could hear was the sound of silence. The weight of everything hit me at once. All the things I had lost, all the things I had thrown away. It wasn't just her love. It was her trust, her belief in me. And those were things that could never be regained. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel it all, the grief, the shame, the loss. It felt like my heart had been shattered, but it was the only way I could truly understand the depth of what I had done. There was no going back, no fixing things. I had broken it all, and the pieces were scattered too far for me to ever put together. I didn't try to call her again. I didn't try to justify myself or to win her back. I knew that was never going to happen. What I needed to do now was live with the truth. I had to live with the knowledge that I had caused irreparable harm to someone I once loved, and that no amount of regret or sorrow would ever change that. Amanda was right. Moving on was the only thing I could do. But it wasn't just about moving on from her. It was about moving on from myself, from the person I had been. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realize now that there's no way to go back and fix what's been broken. We all make mistakes, and some of them are so deep, so unforgivable, that the only thing left to do is learn from them and move forward. It's painful, it's heartbreaking, but it's the only way to grow. For so long, I was focused on control, on manipulating the situation to my advantage, thinking that I could avoid the consequences. But in the end, it wasn't the control I craved that caused me the most pain. It was the loss of trust, the loss of someone who truly mattered to me. So here I am, left with the cold, harsh reality that some things can never be repaired. And while it's hard to accept, it's a part of life that we all must face at some point. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope that my story serves as a reminder. Never take someone for granted. Never let your own insecurities destroy the one person who loved you unconditionally. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking for understanding. But if you've ever made a mistake that you can't undo, or if you've ever lost someone because of your own actions, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's start a conversation. Please leave a comment below with your reflections, and if this story resonated with you in any way, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll be sharing more stories, ones that dive deep into the complexity of human relationships and the consequences of our choices. Thank you for being part of this journey.